Hi everyone, welcome to my talk. So, as you can tell, today I'm going to talk about better report writing for faster triage times. So, let me first introduce myself and then we can get right into it. So, my name is Hawa and I work as an application security engineer at Buckcrowd, which means that I am a triager at Buckcrowd. And I'm also a YouTuber. I have a YouTube channel called Hawa where I post bug bounty tutorials and technical tutorials about web application testing. And I also interview some amazing people from the community. So definitely check out my YouTube channel, shameless self promo. And I'm also a bug bounty hunter whenever I get time from all of that. So let me tell you what we're going to explore today. So first, we're going to answer the question, why do some reports take so long to be triaged? And once we're done with that, I'm going to move on to give you some tips on how you can write better reproduction steps and how you can show impact in your report. And these tips have come from my point of view as a triager. So I'm just going to share that with you. So you can help whoever's on the other side of the screen validate your bug and triage it faster. So let's begin. So let's answer the question, why do some reports take so long to get triaged? So the main reason is extended communication between triager and researcher. This means that probably the triager asks too many questions and the researcher gets back, and there's a lot of back and forth, which sometimes takes days, probably weeks. And the reason why all of this communication comes up in the first place is because the original report does not mention clear reproduction steps, or it does not define the impact of the bug clearly. And that's why there's a lot of questioning and lots of delays, basically. So let me give you some tips on how you can write better reproduction steps. And remember that the end goal of your reproduction steps should be to allow the triager to follow those step by step and then avoid any mistakes. So this will also allow us to follow it and then send it to the customer as fast as possible. So let me start with some don'ts first of what you should avoid when writing a report. So the first thing is, don't write long paragraphs. They can be really hard to scan, and if you have something important to mention, then try to make it in a point form or make it really short and easily readable paragraphs. The second thing is to not include any kind of sensitive information in your report, and sensitive information includes cookies, credentials, tokens. So basically anything that you're putting in your report, which includes any screenshots, the steps, all of that should not have anything sensitive. And lastly, do not use a report template. So try to write your original report. Don't use a template. And the reason for that is because when researchers use templates, they end up including information that's way too much and probably not even necessary. So now that we're done with the don'ts, let me tell you what you should do. So the first thing that you should do is write short and clear steps. So as you can see in this example, the steps on the left and the steps on the right are communicating the same thing. But just by looking at both of them, you can tell that the steps on the left are much easier to parse and much easier to read. And if a triager looks at the steps on the right, they will think that it's an extremely complicated task when it is actually not, right? So triagers will definitely be thankful to you if they can scan simpler steps rather than parse those long paragraphs. And you should try to write short and clear steps instead of writing long paragraphs where too many actions are clubbed into one step. So let's go on to the next point, and that is adding a proof of concept. So sometimes bug hunters don't include proof of concepts, and that means that triagers have to spend that extra time to reproduce the submission. And in some cases, what happens is that they do not succeed because there's something missing or they make a mistake. And then again, that leads to asking questions and causes delays and all of that. So if you include a POC, it allows us to do it faster and validate it, send it to the customer. So your proof of concept doesn't even need to be anything that's really complicated. It can be quite simple. So let's look at these examples. A reflected or stored XSS POC can simply be a link that once the triager clicks on it, it shows that the JavaScript is being run on the victim's browser. Another example is using a link for a get-based open redirect POC, where again, if the triager clicks on it, they just get redirected to the attacker control domain. And lastly, if you have a post-based CSRF, all you can do is show an HTML file as a POC, and when the triager opens that on their browser and submits the request, it makes the changes on their account, or whatever the impact of your CSRF is in that case. So these are some examples of simpler POCs. But in case your proof of concept has to be complicated for some reason, or if it's extremely complicated, then try to leave an explanation about it so that the customers and the engineers who are responsible for fixing the code and fixing the bug, they can at least understand what's going on, right? So now let's talk about video POCs. So first, let me tell you that you should try to avoid video POCs as much as possible, because videos can, in some cases, take longer to follow, because triagers have to continuously pause and then follow the steps. And while they're doing that, it becomes hard to get like an overview of the bug and an overview of what's happening, right? So try to avoid them. But if you think that you have to put it, and if it's extremely necessary, then you can do a lot to make it very efficient. And I'm going to give you some tips on how you can do that. So the first thing is, do not write steps on Notepad on your screen. So try to include all the reproduction steps in your original report. So the video should not be like, we should not rely on the report to follow your submission. Then make the video short and to the point, and you can also edit it in if there's too much unnecessary time recorded. For example, sometimes a page takes too long to load, and when you're intercepting requests in burp, you probably go through 10 requests before you reach the one that you need to. So you can edit your video to remove all of that, and feel free to add music as well, because when you add music, it shows the triager that you have taken that bit of extra time to edit the video and make it more efficient for us. Another tip is make sure the video is of good quality. It should have a good resolution. It should have a good bit rate, so that any text that's on the screen is clearly visible to us. And lastly, the best place to upload your video is Vimeo with a password protection, so that the customers as well as the bug bounty platforms have that assurance that no one has viewed the video, because no one can without knowing the password. And the smallest of details are very important to mention. And sometimes I have seen reports being delayed for like 1 or 2 days because the researcher forgot to mention a really tiny detail, which was probably insignificant, but which probably they thought it was insignificant, but it was actually quite important. And those details can be as small as whether the user was authenticated or not. And another thing you can do is put inline screenshots after each step. And this usually happens when there's too much going on a single web page, and you put inline screenshots so we can visualize it, we can see it, and then we can easily just reproduce that. Another thing you can do is provide URLs for direct navigation to the endpoint. So again, if we can't find something on the UI, or maybe if for some reason our layouts are different, if you provide a URL, we can directly navigate to that endpoint and reproduce the bug, right? Another thing you can do is mention the vulnerable HTTP request. So usually if there is manipulation of an HTTP request involved in any manner, then try to mention that HTTP request, again, for the same reason that if we can't find something, then we can directly use that request and reproduce the bug, and there's no problem. And lastly, be safe and don't forget to redact any kind of sensitive information in your report. Sensitive information, as I said before, cookies and tokens, credentials. So all of that, make sure it's redacted and be safe. So let's go on to our next point. And this is a really interesting scenario as well. A lot of the times you'll probably have more than one user in your submission who's involved in your submission. And this usually happens in the case of access control bugs, where you have more than 2 users involved. So there are three most important points that you should always mention in these kind of scenarios. The first thing you should mention is what is the user's role in the application. So as you can see in this example, user A has an admin role and user B has an analyst role. The second point to mention is who is the attacker and who is the victim. As you can see here, user A is the victim and user B is the attacker. So this again, these 2 points make it really clear to us what is the impact and who is attacking who and how is it going to work. And lastly, steps for each of them should be separated. You can use Markdown for that. I know most bug bounty platforms do support Markdown for their reports. So try to separate the steps that user A needs to make from the step that user B needs to do, because that will again reduce the amount of confusion and make it easy for us to reproduce your bug. So now let's go on to the next section, which is showing impact. Now, once the triager reproduces all your steps and ensures that all the steps are valid and working, the next task is to actually demonstrate an attack scenario. Now, the best way to show the impact of your finding is to write an attack scenario of how an attacker could use the bug to harm either the application or its users. So the main question that you should seek to answer while writing an attack scenario is who would want to exploit the bug and why? And another question is, how does this affect the app and its users? So an answer to that could be that if the bug is exploited, then it could lead to a GDPR violation. So keep in mind that an attack scenario is not always needed especially for obviously valid bugs like SQL injection or XSS, because after all, triagers are also security engineers. They do know what impact these kind of bugs hold. But writing an attack scenario helps you think about the bug that you're reporting. In some cases, you might discover that your bug is probably not that impactful as you thought it was, or even the opposite, that you discover that it's more impactful. So let me give you some points that you should think about when you're writing an attack scenario. And the first is the starting position of an attacker. So the starting position means what does the attacker already have access to and what will they get once they exploit the bug. So an example is a user who has a super admin role will probably not be interested in exploiting a user with a normal role, but vice versa is more likely, right? So keep in mind the starting position of the attacker. Next is assumptions that you make about the victim. So if you're assuming that the victim is going to click on a link, that's fine. But if you're assuming that the victim is going to click on their link, enter their credentials, download some files, execute that file on their system, that's a bit of a stretch. So you might want to look at that as well. Another thing is prerequisites for the attacker. So does an attacker need physical access to the device? What are the prerequisites that you need over here? And another thing is prerequisites for the application. So does your bug depend on some kind of outdated browser version or a specific version of the app? Does it require some settings to be enabled or disabled? So keep in mind that more assumptions and more prerequisites means lesser impact. So, okay, let's go on to an example attack scenario. So this is an example of what an attack scenario could look like. So they are not exactly steps to reproduce the bug, but it's rather just a quick overview of how the bug can be exploited in real life by an attacker. So it should hope to include any challenges, barriers that an attacker will face while exploiting it. So as you can see, the first thing I've mentioned is the admin of the workspace invites a chat operator with a low privileged role, and the low privileged role user is the attacker. So here it makes it very clear that the starting position is the attacker is a low privileged user, and the attacker then gets access to the UUIDs of all the other users of the workspace. So this immediately shows me that this is going to be a horizontal privilege escalation. And then since the attacker has all the UUIDs, he uses a crafted HTTP request to delete all of them from the workspace, right? So it makes it very clear that the attacker is a low privileged user. He gets the UUIDs and deletes all of them. Pretty clear, right? So that's all the tips that I have for you. So let me give you a quick checklist before we end this video, and you can use this checklist before you sit down to write a report. So a checklist for writing good reproduction steps, the first thing you should do is write short and clear steps instead of long paragraphs. Next, include a proof of concept, really simple. Next is video POCs, which aren't necessary, but if you have to mention them, but if you have to attach them, then try to make it as efficient as possible. Mention any and all minute details. Mention the steps and roles for all users in case there are 2 or 3 users involved. And it goes without saying that you should read your finished steps once again to ensure that there are no errors. And this is a checklist for showing impact. So you can use this while writing an attack scenario. First, you should mention the starting position of the attacker. Then you should mention the assumption that you have made about the victim. And lastly, mention any prerequisites that are required for an app or the attacker. So that was it. I hope you found something useful from this talk. And let's stay in touch. So you can find me on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter. My handle is Farah_Hawa. You can also check out my YouTube channel called Farah Hawa. And I hope you enjoyed this talk. Thank you for watching and have a great day ahead. See you. Bye.